First, I would like to ask the professor, would it be so absurd to admit that today, with the necessary differences, paradoxically, the Israelis are behaving towards the Palestinians as the Nazis behaved towards the Jews during the Second World War? The Palestinian people should be considered a partisan people, in some sense. And especially according to her, why is Western public opinion so blindly aligned with Israel, ignoring the obvious suffering that the Palestinian people have endured for over half a century? A light question to start.
Yes, exactly. So this is obviously a topic of extreme complexity, and I will try to be very cautious in answering this question because it is very easy to make missteps and say things that were not actually intended. So I believe that it is perfectly possible today for those who observe what is happening in Israel to harshly criticize Israeli policy, the Israeli government, and the way many Israeli governments have behaved towards the Palestinians over the decades, without at all succumbing to the temptation to say that they resemble the Nazis. Well, no, because that's not the case, of course. Even if I wanted to have an extremely hostile attitude towards Israel and not recognize that there are, let's say, things that need to be balanced, even if I wanted to say that the blame for that situation lies exclusively with Israel, we would still be light years away from the way the Nazis treated the Jews. This must be said, and I feel comfortable saying it because I am personally very distressed and disgusted by the way Israel treats the Palestinians. It is a tragedy in the sense that this word carries. That is a frightening situation for which no one is to blame, or everyone is to blame, and each person is to blame believing they are not, without realizing they are, and therefore there is no way out for anyone to emerge with a clear conscience. In this sense, the situation in Israel is a tragedy that remains unresolved. I believe that it is indeed perfectly possible to criticize the Israeli state, especially since many Israeli intellectuals do so. Many Israeli historians, as well as numerous writers and journalists in Israel, have no difficulty in harshly criticizing the behavior of the Israeli government. Of course, none of them would dream of saying that Israel is like Nazi Germany, and God forbid. So, in my opinion, we must be very careful in these matters, which by their nature divide global public opinion, and exaggerations are not helpful. If we are saddened by the fact that, as it were, the tragedy of the Palestinians is underestimated in the West, that it is spoken of poorly and too little, that there is always an automatic position taken in favor of the Israeli government and so on, the deaths do not carry the same weight on one side and the other. If this bothers us or does not bother us, depending on how involved we feel. It can also cause us immense pain, or simply if we are more detached, we can recognize that there is an imbalance, an injustice. The last thing we should do is to bring up the Nazis and engage in this kind of discourse, because this type of discourse will never convince anyone, and rather serves only to disqualify those who should instead try to focus on the cold objectivity of the situation, to try to open someone's eyes, just as those in Israel fight for the Israeli government to change its policy.
I think this answer has largely satisfied the question.
Guys, I don't have much time left, so if you have an urgent question, we can still answer one question.
One is available if you want.
Let's do it.
I have a question. Did Giampaolo Panza, with his books and his defeated, want to delegitimize the resistance? Do the books have a historical foundation, or as intellectuals like Tommaso Montanari say, are there glaring historical errors in them?
So, I must confess, first of all, that I haven't read all of Giampaolo Panza's books thoroughly, because I get a sort of, how can I say, a revulsion when I pick up those books. However, I know more or less how they are experienced by those who read them, what effect they have on those who read them. We cannot be in the mind of Giampaolo Panza, and therefore we cannot know if this man, who was once on the left, had a conversion and truly thought that an injustice had been done in Italy, that the defeated deserved to be remembered, or if he realized the effect he was causing with his books, or if he was aware and cynically continued because they made him a lot of money. We can no longer say this. Certainly, books are despicable, not because they may contain inaccuracies. As I frankly say, I do not want to spend even half an hour of my time reading one of those books and checking if perhaps one of the stories reported has been misreported. It could very well be, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. But I also wouldn't be surprised if these books only reported authentic episodes, because it has always been known in Italy that obviously during the resistance in that war, anything could have happened. These things were already known in the 50s, as the fascists were perfectly free in democratic Italy to publish books recounting these events. So everyone already knew about them. Of course, the great art of Pans was to make people believe that no one knew these things, that they couldn't be talked about, which is not true at all. Everyone knew, and many wrote about these matters. After that, indeed, there were dramatic, tragic episodes, crimes committed by partisans, crimes during those days after the end of the war, where, with the authorization of the Allied authorities, the partisans were generally told to clean up for a few days if it was really necessary. There have also been crimes and private vendettas committed there. I mean, who can say it doesn't matter? Of course, it is always a tragedy. But indeed, if we look at the crimes committed by the liberators, then the armies that advanced through the peninsula committed crimes against the civilian population and against prisoners of war from the moment they landed in Sicily. Yet, the populations of the Italian cities welcomed them joyfully, happy that they had arrived. So the problem is that individual episodes can always be found in any context to cast anyone in a good or bad light. What matters is who was on the right side and who was on the wrong side. I challenge anyone today who turns up their nose at the partisans or at Panzer's books on the shelf in plain sight to say, would you have preferred those others to win? Would you want to live in a world where Hitler had won and where the gas chambers continued to operate? Really, if you tell me that sincerely, that's fine with me, okay? But I want to see which readers of Panzer's books would answer yes to this question.
Well, I would say that with this we can say goodbye. It's a great closing. And I truly thank you very much for being here with us.